The sun rose over the small town of Oak Ridge as Darlene Jones tied her apron around her waist. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the Blue Plate diner was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft clinking of cups as Darlene set up for the day. At 35, Darlene had worked at the diner for almost 10 years. Her dark skin glowed under the diner's yellow lights as she moved with the ease of someone who knew every inch of the place. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite the early hour, she hummed a soft tune. Life had not been easy for Darlene. After her husband left 6 years ago, she raised her 2 children, Zoe and Kyle, all by herself. Every morning she woke up at 4:30, got the kids ready for school, dropped them off at her mother's house, and then headed to the diner. After her shift ended at 3, she picked up the kids, helped with homework, made dinner, and then took online classes until she fell asleep with her textbook on her lap. One day, she often told herself, one day things will be different. The bell above the door jingled as Pete the cook walked in. "Morning, Dee," he said, hanging up his jacket. "You're here early again." "Got some bills to sort through," Darlene replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The truth was that she had been late on rent last month, and her landlord was not a patient man. By 6:30, the diner filled with the usual morning crowd. There was Joe, the mailman, who always ordered scrambled eggs and wheat toast. Linda, the high school teacher, who needed 3 cups of coffee before she could start her day, and the group of retired men who took up the big corner table, arguing about sports and politics. Darlene moved between tables with grace, remembering every order without writing it down. The customers loved her. She knew about Linda's sick mother and always asked how she was doing. She saved the sports section for Bill, the oldest of the retired men. She remembered how everyone liked their coffee: black for Joe, cream, and 2 sugars for Linda, and half decaf for Bill because of his heart condition. Around 9:30, when the morning rush slowed down, the bell above the door jingled again. Darlene looked up to see an old man she had never seen before. He moved slowly, leaning on a wooden cane. His clothes were clean but worn: a gray coat that had seen better days, pants that were slightly too big, and shoes that were carefully polished but had cracks in the leather. "Sit anywhere you like," Darlene called out with a warm smile. The old man looked around and chose a small table by the window. He sat down with some effort, placing his cane against the wall. Darlene grabbed a menu and a glass of water and walked over to him. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome to Blue Plate. Can I start you off with some coffee?" The old man looked up. His face was lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were a clear, bright blue that seemed too young for his aged face. "Just coffee would be fine, thank you," he said in a soft voice. "Black, please." Darlene nodded and went to get the coffee pot. When she returned, she noticed the old man looking out the window with a sad expression. "First time in Oak Ridge?" she asked as she poured his coffee. The old man nodded. "Just passing through. It's a nice town." "It is," Darlene agreed. "Lived here all my life. Are you sure you don't want anything to eat? Our pancakes are the best in the county." The old man shook his head. "Just coffee today, thank you." Darlene left him to his coffee, but she kept an eye on him as she served her other customers. There was something about him that tugged at her heart. Maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, or how he wrapped his weathered hands around the coffee mug as if trying to absorb its warmth. An hour passed, and the old man still sat there, having ordered a second cup of coffee. Darlene was wiping down a nearby table when she heard a soft cough. "Miss?" the old man called. "Could I have my check, please?" "Of course," Darlene said, reaching into her apron pocket for her notepad. "That'll be $2.50 for the 2 coffees." The old man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out some coins. He counted them slowly, his fingers slightly shaking. A look of embarrassment crossed his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I seem to be short. I thought I had more." He held out his hand, showing only 1.75 in change. Darlene saw the shame in his eyes, and without hesitation she said, "Don't worry about it. Coffee's on me today." The old man looked up, surprised. "I can't let you do that." You work hard for your money. Darlene smiled. It's just coffee. Besides, we all need a little kindness sometimes, right? The old man studied her face as if looking for some hidden motive. Finding none, he slowly nodded. Thank you. That's very kind. My pleasure, Darlene said. You have a good day now. As she turned to walk away, the old man asked, What's your name? Darlene, she replied. Darlene Jones. Thank you, Darlene Jones, the old man said. My name is Howard. Howard Grant. Darlene smiled and went back to work. She didn't think much about the small act of kindness. It wasn't the first time she had covered for a customer who came up short, and it wouldn't be the last. The next day, Howard came back. He sat at the same table and ordered the same black coffee. This time he had exact change ready when Darlene brought his check. As he was leaving, he paused by the door. Your coffee is very good, he said. Darlene laughed. Don't tell Pete that. He thinks it tastes like dirt, says I make it too strong. It's perfect, Howard said with a small smile, and then he left. This became a pattern. Every day at 9:30, Howard would come in, order black coffee, sometimes 2 cups, pay his bill, and leave with a polite nod. Sometimes they chatted briefly. Darlene learned that Howard was 78, that he had been a teacher many years ago, and that he was staying at the small motel at the edge of town. On Friday, a week after Howard's first visit, the diner was unusually busy. A bus had broken down just outside town, and many of the passengers had come to the diner while waiting for repairs. Darlene was rushing between tables, her usual calm efficiency strained by the sudden rush. When Howard came in at his usual time, Darlene could only give him a quick smile as she hurried past with plates balanced on her arms. She brought him his coffee when she could, but she didn't have time for their usual short conversation. The rush lasted through lunch, and by the time the bus passengers left, Darlene was exhausted. She noticed that Howard was still at his table, long after he usually left. As the diner emptied out, she went over to check on him. Sorry about the chaos today, she said. Can I get you anything else? Howard shook his head. No, thank you, but I noticed you didn't stop for lunch yourself. Darlene shrugged. No time. I'll grab something later. Howard frowned. That's not good. You need to take care of yourself too. His concern touched Darlene. Don't you worry about me. I'm used to it. Sit down for a moment, Howard said, gesturing to the chair across from him. You look like you need a break. Darlene glanced around the diner. There were only a few customers left, and Pete could handle them for a few minutes. She sat down, with a grateful sigh. Tough day? Howard asked. Tough few years, Darlene replied with a tired laugh. Then, to her surprise, she found herself telling him about her struggles. The bills piling up, her worry about affording her daughter's glasses, her dream of one day having enough saved to open her own small bakery. I'm sorry, she said, suddenly embarrassed. You don't need to hear all this. Sometimes it helps to talk, Howard said gently. And sometimes it helps to listen. Darlene looked at him gratefully. There was something about Howard that made her feel at ease, like talking to an old friend. What Darlene didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that Howard Grant was not who he appeared to be. The worn clothes, the careful counting of change, the modest motel room, these were all part of a disguise, because Howard Grant was actually Harold Greenfield, founder of Greenfield Enterprises and one of the richest men in the country. And he had been looking for someone exactly like Darlene Jones. For the next 2 weeks, Howard came to the Blue Plate Diner every morning at 9:30. His visits became a part of Darlene's routine that she looked forward to. Sometimes the diner was busy, and they only exchanged a few words. Other times, when business was slow, Howard would ask Darlene to sit with him for a few minutes. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Howard arrived earlier than usual. Only a few tables were occupied, and Darlene had just finished refilling coffee cups. When Howard took his usual seat by the window, she brought him coffee without being asked. You're early today, she said with a smile. Less traffic, Howard replied. He hesitated, then added, I was hoping we might talk a bit if you have time. Darlene glanced around the diner. Let me check on my other tables first and I'll be right back. When she returned a few minutes later, she sat down across from Howard. Everything okay? You seem a bit down today. Howard stared into his coffee cup. Today would have been my wife's birthday, he said softly. Rose. She passed away 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Darlene said. That must be hard. Howard nodded. We were married for 47 years. Some days I still turn to tell her something. Before I remember she's gone. Tell me about her, Darlene said gently. A small smile crossed Howard's face. She was the kindest person I've ever known, always helping others even when we didn't have much ourselves. He looked up at Darlene. She would have liked you. I think I would have liked her too, Darlene replied. Howard reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn photo. He handed it to Darlene. The picture showed a younger Howard with a woman who had a warm smile and kind eyes. She's beautiful, Darlene said, handing the photo back. The most beautiful woman in the world, Howard agreed, carefully returning the photo to his pocket. We never had children. That was our one regret. For the next 20 minutes, Howard told Darlene stories about Rose, how they met at a dance, their small wedding, the little house they saved for years to buy. Darlene listened, asking questions now and then, seeing the joy these memories brought him despite his sadness. Finally, Howard seemed to shake himself out of his memories. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take up so much of your time with an old man's stories. Don't apologize, Darlene said. I enjoyed hearing about Rose. She sounds wonderful. Howard smiled. Thank you for listening. It helps to talk about her. Anytime, Darlene said, and she meant it. As the days passed, Howard continued his daily visits. Sometimes he brought a book to read while he drank his coffee. Other times he would chat with the other regulars who had grown used to his presence. But he always had a special smile for Darlene. One day, Howard came in looking worried. When Darlene brought his coffee, she noticed he was fidgeting with his cane. Everything okay? She asked. Howard sighed. Not really. The motel I've been staying at is closing for renovations. I need to find a new place to stay, but I'm not sure where to go. How long do you have? Darlene asked. Until the end of the week, Howard replied. I've been looking at other motels, but the cheaper ones are all full and the others. He trailed off, but Darlene understood. The other motels in town were more expensive. Darlene thought for a moment. I might be able to help, she said slowly. My neighbor Mrs. Wilson rents out a room sometimes. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and the price is fair. I could ask her if it's available. Hope lit up Howard's face. Would you? I would be very grateful. I'll call her on my break, Darlene promised. That afternoon, Darlene gave Howard the news that Mrs. Wilson's room was available. She said you can move in tomorrow if you want. It's $30 a week, utilities included. That's perfect, Howard said, relief clear in his voice. Thank you, Darlene. I don't know what I would have done without your help. Darlene brushed off his thanks. That's what friends are for. The next day, Howard didn't come to the diner at his usual time. Darlene found herself checking the door every few minutes, worry growing as the hours passed. By 2's honor, when her shift was almost over, she was genuinely concerned. Just as she was about to ask Pete if he could cover for her so she could check Mrs. Wilson's house, the bell above the door jingled. Howard walked in looking tired but relieved. Was worried about you, Darlene said as she poured his coffee. Moving took longer than I expected, Howard explained. But I'm all settled now. Mrs. Wilson is a very nice lady. She is, Darlene agreed. She's been a good neighbor to me and the kids for years. Howard took a sip of his coffee. Actually, I came to ask a favor. I noticed Mrs. Wilson has a small garden, but she has trouble tending it because of her arthritis. I thought I might help her with it as a thank you for the room, but I don't know much about gardening. I wondered if you might have some advice. Darlene laughed. I kill every plant I touch, but my son Kyle loves gardening. He helps Mrs. Wilson sometimes. I'm sure he'd be happy to show you the basics. I wouldn't want to impose, Howard started, but Darlene cut him off. It's no imposition. Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? You can meet Kyle and Zoe, and Kyle can tell you all about Mrs. Wilson's garden. Howard hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Thank you. The next evening, Darlene's small apartment was filled with the smell of her famous chicken stew. She had spent her day off cleaning the apartment and cooking, wanting everything to be perfect. She wasn't sure why it mattered so much that Howard liked her home and her children, but it did. At exactly 6 hours, there was a knock at the door. Kyle, a serious 10-year-old with his mother's kind eyes, opened it. Hello, Howard said. You must be Kyle. I'm Howard. He held out a small potted plant. Your mother tells me you like gardening. Kyle's face lit up. Is this for me? Howard nodded. It's a mini rose bush. It reminded me of someone special. Cool. Thank you. Kyle took the plant carefully. Come, Mom's in the kitchen and Zoe is setting the table. Howard followed Kyle into the small but cozy apartment. Darlene came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Welcome, she said with a smile. Something smells wonderful, Howard said. Mom makes the best stew, said a voice from the dining area. A girl of about 12 came into the living room. She had her mother's features and a bright, curious gaze. I'm Zoe, she said, holding out her hand, very grown up. Pleased to meet you, Zoe, Howard said, shaking her hand. I'm Howard. Mom told us you need help with gardening, Zoe said. Kyle's the plant expert. I'm more into computers. Dinner's ready, Darlene announced. Let's eat while it's hot. As they sat around the small table, Howard watched the easy interaction between Darlene and her children. The love between them was obvious in every smile, every gentle tease, every shared look. For a moment he felt a pang of the loneliness that had been his constant companion since Rose died. Howard? Darlene's voice broke into his thoughts. Would you like more stew? Yes, please, he said. It's delicious. After dinner, Kyle eagerly showed Howard his plant books and explained what Mrs. Wilson grew in her garden. Zoe showed him her science project about solar energy, and Darlene watched, a warm feeling in her chest at how naturally Howard fit into their little family circle. What Darlene didn't know was that in his expensive hotel suite across town, Harold Greenfield's assistant was compiling a detailed report on Darlene Jones, her work history, her credit score, her children's school records, even her outstanding medical bills from when Zoe broke her arm 2 years ago, and in his other pocket, the one he never showed to Darlene, Harold carried not a worn photo of his late wife, but a list of potential recipients for the annual Greenfield Foundation Second Chance Grant, a life-changing sum of money given to one deserving individual each year, a list on which Darlene Jones's name now appeared at the very top. Over the next month, Howard became a regular part of Darlene's life. He still came to the diner every morning for coffee, but now he also joined her family for dinner once a week. He helped Kyle with the garden at Mrs. Wilson's house, and he listened patiently as Zoe explained her latest computer game. For a man who claimed to have no experience with children, he seemed to know exactly how to talk to them. One Tuesday morning, Darlene arrived at work to find Pete looking worried. Everything okay? She asked as she tied on her apron. Pete shook his head. Jeff called. The refrigerator broke down last night. All the food is ruined. Jeff was the owner of the Blue Plate Diner. He had inherited it from his father 10 years ago, but he rarely came in anymore, leaving the day-to-day running to Pete and Darlene. Can we get it fixed? Darlene asked. Already called the repair guy, Pete said. But he says the whole unit needs to be replaced. That's going to cost at least $3,000. Darlene's heart sank. She knew the diner wasn't doing well, financially. Jeff had been talking about selling it for months. What does Jeff say? She asked. Pete looked away. He says he can't afford a new refrigerator right now. He's thinking about closing the diner. The news hit Darlene like a physical blow. The diner wasn't just her job. It was her second home. The thought of it closing made her stomach knot with anxiety. He can't do that, she said. What about all of us? What about our customers? Pete shrugged helplessly. I know, Dee, but what can we do? They opened the diner anyway, serving only coffee and items that didn't need refrigeration. Darlene tried to keep a smile on her face as she explained the situation to their regular customers, but inside she was panicking. If the diner closed, where would she work? Jobs were scarce in Oak Ridge, especially ones that would work with her schedule as a single mom. When Howard came in, he immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? He asked as Darlene poured his coffee with hands that shook slightly. She told him about the refrigerator and Jeff's talk of closing the diner. I'm sorry, Howard said, genuine concern in his eyes. I know how much this place means to you. Darlene blinked back tears. I don't know what I'm going to do, Howard. I can barely pay my bills with this job if I lose it. She couldn't finish the sentence. Howard reached across the table and patted her hand. Don't give up hope yet. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Darlene tried to smile. From your mouth to God's ears, she said. That afternoon, after her shift ended, Darlene sat at her small kitchen table with a pile of bills in front of her. She had been saving for months to pay for Zoe's school trip to Washington, D.C. That money would now have to go toward rent and groceries while she looked for a new job. The phone rang, startling her. It was Jeff. Darlene, he said, sounding confused. The strangest thing just happened. A man came to the diner after you left. He said he was a friend of yours. Howard something? Darlene frowned. Howard Grant. That's it, Jeff confirmed. Well, he offered to buy the diner. Darlene nearly dropped the phone. What? Yeah, I couldn't believe it either. He said he's been eating there for weeks and thinks it's a special place. He offered a fair price too. But, Darlene struggled to make sense of this. Howard doesn't have that kind of money. He's staying in a rented room. He counts pennies to pay for his coffee. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, he showed me a bank statement. That says otherwise. Darlene, this guy is loaded. He's going to keep the diner open, keep all the staff, and he wants you to manage it. Darlene sat down hard on a kitchen chair. Me? Manage the diner? That's what he said. He wants to meet with both of us tomorrow morning to discuss the details. Can you be there at 8? Yes, Darlene said faintly. I'll be there. After hanging up, Darlene sat in stunned silence. None of this made sense. Howard, with money. Howard, buying the diner. Howard, wanting her to manage it. There had to be some mistake. She thought about calling Mrs. Wilson to ask if Howard was home, but decided against it. She would see him tomorrow and get answers then. Darlene barely slept that night. Her mind kept going back to all her interactions with Howard, looking for clues she might have missed. The worn clothes, the careful counting of change, the simple room rental. None of it suggested a man with enough money to buy a diner. The next morning, Darlene arrived at the Blue Plate Diner at 7:45. Jeff was already there, looking nervous and excited. At exactly 8 o'clock, a black car pulled up outside the diner. The driver got out and opened the back door. Howard stepped out, but he looked different. Instead of his usual worn gray coat and scuffed shoes, he was wearing a well-tailored suit. His posture was straighter, his movements more confident. When he walked into the diner, his eyes found Darlene immediately. He smiled, but it was a hesitant smile, as if he wasn't sure how she would react. Good morning, Darlene, he said. I imagine you have some questions. A few, Darlene said, her voice steadier than she felt. Howard turned to Jeff. Would you mind if I spoke to Darlene alone first? My lawyer will be here at 9 to handle the paperwork. Jeff nodded quickly. Sure. I'll be in the back. When Jeff had gone, Howard gestured to a table. Shall we sit? Darlene sat down, her eyes never leaving Howard's face. Who are you? She asked simply. Howard took a deep breath. My name is Harold Greenfield. I'm the founder and CEO of Greenfield Enterprises. Darlene's eyes widened. Even she had heard of Greenfield Enterprises. It was a huge company that owned hotels, resorts, and office buildings all over the country. Don't understand, she said. Why would you pretend to be poor? Why come to this diner every day? Why? She gestured around the diner. Why would you want to buy this place? Harold, it was hard for Darlene to think of him as anything but Howard, looked down at his hands. For the past 5 years, since my wife died, I've been doing what I call undercover philanthropy. I disguise myself as a person of modest means and look for people who show kindness without expecting anything in return. Once a year, I choose one person to receive a special grant from my foundation. He looked up at Darlene. That first day when you paid for my coffee without hesitation, even though I knew you were struggling yourself, that caught my attention. But it was everything after that. The way you listened when I talked about Rose, the way you helped me find a place to stay, the way you invited me into your home and treated me like family. That's why you're this year's recipient. Darlene shook her head, trying to process all this. So buying the diner, that's the grant? Harold nodded. Part of it. The diner will be yours to manage, with an option to buy it yourself over time if you want. There's also a scholarship fund for Kyle and Zoe, and a grant to help you finish your own education. Tears filled Darlene's eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Harold replied gently. Just know that while I may have been dishonest about my identity, everything else was real. Our friendship, the time with your children, none of that was fake. Darlene wiped away a tear. Does this mean you won't be coming for coffee anymore? Harold smiled, relief clear on his face. I hope I'll still be welcome, though I may not come every day. I do have a company to run. What about Mrs. Wilson's room? Darlene asked. Paid through the end of the month, Harold said, and I've arranged for a landscaping service to take care of her garden, though I told them to leave a small section for Kyle to tend. He's quite proud of his tomato plants. Darlene laughed through her tears. You think of everything, don't you? I try, Harold said. Rose always said I was good with details. She would be proud of what you're doing, Darlene said softly. Harold's eyes grew misty. I hope so. Just then, the bell above the door jingled and a man in a suit carrying a briefcase walked in. That's my lawyer with the paperwork, Harold said. Are you ready to become a business manager, Ms. Jones? Darlene took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. I think I am, Mr. Greenfield. As Jeff came out from the back room and introductions were made, Darlene felt as if she were in a dream. Just yesterday, she had been terrified about losing her job. Today, she was about to become the manager of the Blue Plate Diner, and it all started with a simple cup of coffee and an act of kindness that cost her less than $3. News spread quickly in the small town of Oak Ridge. By the end of the week, everyone knew that the Blue Plate Diner had a new owner and that Darlene Jones was now the manager. Some people were surprised, others were curious, but most of the regular customers were just happy that the diner would stay open. On Monday morning, Darlene arrived at the diner an hour earlier than usual. She had spent the weekend going through the papers Harold's lawyer had given her. There was so much to learn about running a business: taxes, payroll, inventory, ordering supplies. Her head was spinning with all the new information. But as she unlocked the front door and turned on the lights, she felt a surge of pride. This was her place now. Not just a job, but a responsibility. A chance to make something of herself. Pete arrived a few minutes later, grinning when he saw her already at work. Morning, boss, he said with a mock salute. Darlene laughed. Don't you start, I'm still getting used to the idea. Well, I think it's great, Pete said. No one deserves it more than you, Dee. And you won't believe what came this morning. He pointed to the back door where 2 men were carrying in a brand new, top-of-the-line refrigerator. Mr. Greenfield sure doesn't waste any time, Pete remarked. No, he doesn't, Darlene agreed, thinking of the whirlwind of the past few days. After the men installed the refrigerator, a delivery truck arrived with fresh food to stock it. Harold had thought of everything. By the time the diner opened at 6:30, they were ready for business as usual. The morning crowd was bigger than normal. Everyone wanted to see Darlene and hear the story firsthand. She told it again and again, how Howard had been a regular customer, how he turned out to be Harold Greenfield, how he decided to buy the diner and make her the manager. "It's like something out of a movie," Linda the teacher said, shaking, her head in amazement. "Just goes to show," Joe the mailman added, "what comes around goes around. You've been helping folks in this town for years, Dee. About time somebody helped you." Darlene blushed at the praise but couldn't help feeling that they were right. For once in her life, her hard work and kindness were being rewarded. At 9:30, the bell above the door jingled. Harold walked in wearing a casual but expensive-looking sweater and slacks. The diner fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Darlene came out from behind the counter, smiling. "Good morning, Mr. Greenfield. Coffee?" Harold smiled back. "Please. And it's still Howard to you, Darlene. Mr. Greenfield makes me feel old." This broke the tension, and soon Harold was surrounded by curious customers, all wanting to meet the billionaire who had been living quietly among them for weeks. He answered their questions with good humor, but Darlene could tell he was uncomfortable being the center of attention. After a while, she caught his eye and nodded toward the back office. He excused himself from the crowd and followed her. "Thank you," he said when they were alone. "I'm not used to being a local celebrity. They'll calm down in a day or two," Darlene assured him. "Small-town excitement doesn't last long. Next week someone's cow will escape, and that will be the big news." Harold laughed. "I hope you're right." "The new refrigerator is wonderful," Darlene said. "Thank you." "Just the first of many improvements," Harold replied. "I've been thinking about expanding the menu, maybe adding a bakery section. You mentioned once that you like to bake." Darlene's eyes widened. "I do, but I'm not a professional." "You could take some classes," Harold suggested. "There's a good culinary school in the city. It's only an hour drive." "I don't know," Darlene hesitated. "With the kids and now managing the diner." "Think about it," Harold said. "We could hire someone to cover for you 1 or 2 days a week. And speaking of the kids, how do they take the news?" Darlene smiled, remembering their reactions. Zoe was skeptical at first. She wanted to know if you were really a billionaire. "I think she Googled you." Harold laughed. "Smart girl." "Kyle was more worried about whether you would still help him with the garden," Darlene continued. "When I told him about the landscaping service for Mrs. Wilson, he was a little disappointed until I mentioned the section they're leaving for him." "I'll still help him if he wants," Harold said. "I've grown quite fond of those tomato plants." Darlene studied his face. "You really meant it, didn't you? About our friendship being real?" "Every word," Harold said solemnly. "In fact, I was hoping we could continue our weekly dinners, if you're still willing to have me." "Of course," Darlene said without hesitation. "The kids would be upset if you stopped coming." "So would I," she added softly. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Pete poked his head in. "Sorry, boss, but the delivery guy is here with the new menus. Where do you want them?" "I'll be right there," Darlene said. As Pete left, she turned back to Harold. "Duty calls." "I'll let you get back to work," Harold said. "I have a meeting in the city this afternoon anyway. But I'll see you tomorrow for coffee." "I'll save your usual table," Darlene promised. The next few weeks were the busiest of Darlene's life. During the day, she managed the diner, learning more about the business side with Harold's patient guidance. In the evenings, she took online business classes, determined to earn her degree now that she could afford it. 3 nights a week, she attended baking classes at the culinary school Harold had mentioned. The diner thrived under her management. She added several new items to the menu, including fresh-baked muffins and pies that quickly became customer favorites. She hired 2 new waitresses to help with the increased business, and she gave Pete a raise and the title of head cook. Harold kept his promise to stay involved in their lives. He still came for coffee most mornings, though sometimes his business took him out of town for days at a time. He joined Darlene and her children for dinner at least once a week, often bringing small gifts for Kyle and Zoe. For Kyle, it was usually gardening supplies or books about plants. For Zoe, it was computer games or tech gadgets. One evening in late spring, about 3 months after Harold had revealed his true identity, he came to dinner with a more serious gift. After they had eaten, he handed Darlene an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it," Harold said. Inside was a brochure for a summer camp. Not just any camp, but one of the most prestigious STEM camps in the country. It was for gifted students, interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. "I thought Zoe might be interested," Harold explained. "She's so good with computers. This camp could help her develop those skills." Zoe's eyes grew huge as she looked at the brochure. "Mom, can I go, please?" Darlene hesitated. "It looks expensive." "It's taken care of," Harold said quickly. "Part of the education fund we set up, remember?" Darlene looked at her daughter's excited face and nodded. "If you really want to go, Zoe, then yes." Zoe jumped up and hugged first her mother, then Harold. Thank you. "There's something for Kyle, too," Harold said, pulling out another envelope. This one contained information about a junior botanist program at the local community college. It was only 1 day a week throughout the summer, but it would allow Kyle to work with real scientists and learn more about plants. Kyle was more reserved than his sister, but his eyes lit up as he read the brochure. "This sounds really cool," he said. "Thanks, Howard." As the children went off to look more closely at their brochures, Darlene turned to Harold. "You don't have to do all this, you know." "I know," Harold said, "but it makes me happy to see them flourishing. Rose and I always wanted children, but it wasn't meant to be. In a way, being part of your family's life. It feels like I've been given a second chance." Darlene reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We're lucky to have you in our lives, Howard. All of us." Harold squeezed back, his eyes suspiciously bright. "The feeling is mutual, Darlene, entirely mutual." 1 year passed since Harold Greenfield walked into the Blue Plate Diner and changed Darlene's life forever. The diner was now a bustling success. Darlene had added a bakery section that sold her homemade pies, cakes, and bread. People drove from neighboring towns just to taste her famous apple pie. On a warm Saturday morning, Darlene stood behind the counter, looking around with pride. The diner had a fresh coat of paint, new booths, and a modern kitchen. Business was so good that she had hired 3 more staff members. Pete now had 2 assistant cooks, and there were 4 waitresses working different shifts. Darlene checked her watch. It was almost time for the meeting Harold had called. He hadn't told her what it was about, just asked her to keep the diner closed until noon today. She had agreed, curious but not worried. She trusted Harold completely now. At exactly 10 o'clock, Harold arrived in his black car. He wasn't alone. A tall woman in a business suit was with him, carrying a briefcase. They came into the diner and Harold introduced the woman as Ms. Parker, his lawyer. "Good morning, Darlene," Harold said with a smile. "Thank you for closing the diner this morning." "No problem," Darlene replied, "though I'm wondering what this is all about." "Let's sit down," Harold suggested, gesturing to one of the booths. Once they were seated, Ms. Parker opened her briefcase and took out some papers. She handed them to Darlene. "These are the ownership papers for the Blue Plate Diner," Ms. Parker explained. "Currently, Mr. Greenfield is the owner, and you are the manager." Darlene nodded. She knew this, of course. "Mr. Greenfield would like to change that arrangement," Ms. Parker continued. She took out another set of papers. "These documents will transfer full ownership of the diner to you, Ms. Jones." Darlene's mouth fell open. She looked at Harold in shock. "You're giving me the diner? The whole diner?" Harold nodded, his eyes twinkling. "You've done an amazing job. This past year, Darlene. Profits are up, customers are happy, and you've created something special here. You deserve to own it outright." Darlene shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Harold encouraged her. "It was always my plan to eventually give you full ownership. I just wanted to make sure you had time to learn the business first." Tears filled Darlene's eyes. "Thank you, Howard. This means everything to me." After the papers were signed and Ms. Parker left, Darlene and Harold sat drinking coffee and talking about the future. "I've been thinking about expanding," Darlene admitted. Maybe opening a second location in the city. An excellent idea, Harold approved. The Darlene Jones brand could be the next big thing in dining. Darlene laughed. I don't know about that, but I do think my recipes could work in other locations. Whatever you decide to do, I'm behind you 100%, Harold assured her. Darlene smiled gratefully. You've changed our lives, Howard, mine and the kids. I don't know how we can ever repay you. You already have, Harold said softly. By showing kindness to a stranger, and then letting that stranger become part of your family. That evening, Darlene hosted a special dinner at her house. It wasn't their usual weekly dinner with Howard. This time, she had invited others as well, Pete and his wife, Mrs. Wilson, and a few close friends. She wanted to celebrate her new status as a business owner with the people who mattered most to her. Her house was no longer the small apartment they had lived in a year ago. With Harold's help, she had bought a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house with a big backyard for Kyle's garden. It was still in the same neighborhood, close to the children's schools and to Mrs. Wilson, who had become like a grandmother to Kyle and Zoe. As Darlene prepared dinner, she thought about how much had changed. Zoe, now 13, had returned from the STEM camp with a passion for computer programming. She was already talking about college and careers in technology. Kyle, at 11, had transformed their backyard into an impressive garden and was teaching other kids in the neighborhood about plants, and Darlene herself had completed her business degree. She had gained confidence and skills she never thought possible. The terrified single mother who had counted pennies for coffee was gone, replaced by a successful business owner with a bright future. The doorbell rang, and Zoe ran to answer it. Harold stood there with a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of sparkling cider. For the new business owner, he said, handing the gifts to Darlene with a warm smile. Dinner was a joyful affair. Everyone congratulated Darlene and shared stories about the diner and how it had changed under her management. Pete told funny stories about the early days when Darlene was still learning the business side of running a restaurant. Remember when you ordered 500 pounds of potatoes instead of 50? He teased. Darlene laughed. We had potato specials for weeks, but I learned my lesson. After dessert, Darlene's award-winning apple pie, Howard stood up and tapped his glass for attention. I'd like to make an announcement, he said. All eyes turned to him. As some of you know, I've been doing what I call undercover philanthropy for several years. Each year I choose one deserving person to receive help from my foundation. He smiled at Darlene. Last year, that person was Darlene. But what started as philanthropy became something much more valuable: friendship and family. Howard looked around at the assembled faces. I've decided to make my undercover philanthropy more formal. Today I launched the Second Chance Foundation. It will help people who, like Darlene, work hard and show kindness despite their own struggles. And I'm pleased to announce that Darlene has agreed to serve on the foundation's board of directors. Everyone applauded, and Darlene blushed with pleasure. She hadn't told anyone about Howard's offer, but she was excited about the chance to help others the way she had been helped. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Darlene and Howard sat on the back porch looking at the stars. I've been thinking, Howard said quietly. I'm not getting any younger. My house is too big for just one person, and I miss being around family when I'm not here. Darlene turned to look at him, wondering where this was going. I'm not proposing anything romantic, Howard clarified quickly. But I wonder if you and the children might consider moving into my house. There's plenty of room. Kyle could have a much bigger garden. Zoe could have a proper computer room, and you could have a kitchen that would make a professional chef jealous. Darlene was silent for a moment, considering the offer. What would people say, she finally asked. Howard shrugged. People will always talk, but those who matter know the truth, that we've become a family of sorts. Unconventional, perhaps, but no less real for that. Let me think about it, Darlene said, and talk to the kids. Howard nodded. Of course, no pressure, just something to consider. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. Then Darlene said, You know, I've been meaning to ask you something. That first day when you came into the diner and couldn't pay for your coffee, was that planned? Were you testing me specifically? Howard smiled. I'd like to say I was that clever, but no, I really did forget my wallet that day. I was genuinely embarrassed. Your kindness was a surprise, and that's what made me decide to come back. So it really was just a random act of kindness that started all this, Darlene marveled. Nothing random about kindness, Howard replied. In my experience, kind people like you are kind all the time. To everyone. That's what makes them special. Darlene reached over and took his hand. Thank you, Howard. Not just for the diner and the house and the opportunities for the kids, but for coming into our lives and making them richer in ways that have nothing to do with money. Howard squeezed her hand gently. The richness goes both ways, Darlene. Both ways. As they sat there under the stars, Darlene thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a struggling waitress to a business owner, from a lonely old man to a surrogate grandfather, from strangers to family, and it all began with a cup of coffee.